Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook.
Welcome to Game Over Montreal. I predicted it when I wrote it up this morning that Montreal was going to win this one. It just felt like it was going to be a tough way for Nashville to come here, the second half of a back-to-back, with the way that the Canadiens were going to be amped from the crowd after they brought PK back. You knew it was going to be a very energetic start to the game, and it was. And let's face it, Nashville made a game out of it. They came back. The second and the third period, I think they were very, very strong. But the Canadiens had their best period of the season in the first period here, and they continued to find ways to control the game throughout the rest of the game. So great performance from the Montreal Canadiens. I know that the tankers are going to be frustrated, but listen, you got to win some games during the season that make the guys feel good. And I think this one was an important one to win. We've got great guests with us tonight. Eric Young's going to join us, and his internet's not going to die this time. And if it does, well, we'll stop and restart because we're recording and we're not live this time, so we can wait for him. And Ian Boisvert is going to join us as well from Rabid Habs and the Build podcast. Check those out. And of course, with Eric, check him out wherever he'll be wrestling next. We'll talk about his exit and his dramatic stabbing in the beginning of December there, and make sure that you check that out, and also his work on Dangle Bet Selly on the Fantasy Sports Network. All right, let's get straight into it, but before we do, think you know the way it's going to go? Make your bet with Sports Interaction, whether it's hockey, football, or basketball. Sports Interaction has you covered. Bet pregame, live in play, or on one of our many prop bets, like, hey, Cole Caulfield to score 50 goals. It's looking closer again, everyone. It's looking closer again. He got straight away for a little bit, but now he's on pace for 49, so who knows? Join now and see all sports betting has to offer. Want to bet? Head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. That's sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. 19 plus. Please play responsibly. All right, everyone, I'm going to welcome in our guests now. Welcome to the show, Eric and Ian. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing good. I'm not going to answer for Ian, but I'm sure he's doing good as he's a Habs guy, and they just pulled off the win. Really fun game, though.
Yeah, that was probably the most fun game we've seen in a long time out of this Canadian squad. So yeah, I mean, tank ruining aside, which I'm still very much able to put that on the back burner and enjoy a win like this. It was a pretty fun game.
Yeah, I don't know how you guys felt, because I know, like, Eric is a Nashville Predators fan. We both came into it from the Canadian side. Ian, watching PK Subban tonight, you know, a very good player for both franchises. Clearly, the Montreal Canadiens still mean a hell of a lot to him, and clearly he still means a hell of a lot to Montreal Canadiens fans and the organization. You saw Jeff Molson beaming while Subban was giving him props. I don't know about you guys, but when Carey Price came out there and gave him the triple low five, when they were doing that, that's when I started getting into media, and that was kind of like my prime time of Habs fandom outside of when I was a kid. And then they traded Patrick Wall, and I was like, well, screw this crap. I'm going to be a Colorado fan for a bit. So that got me a little bit emotional. I was like annoyed that I was a little bit emotional about it, but I was looking at it and I was like, these guys are like the two franchise cornerstones of this team when I started covering them professionally, as like coming from a fan perspective, and both of them are never going to lace up skates for this organization again. Like, let's face it, it's not going to happen. It's a weird and cathartic moment, but unfortunately they never got their Stanley Cup together.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it was closure. It was closure that I think we kind of needed. I was the same way. I got very emotional after, you know, I was holding it together until Carey Price walked out there. That was tough, because seeing them both like that, the only thing I could think of was that it didn't need to be this way. This didn't need to be the way we said goodbye to these guys. And, you know, you feel like, you know, I mean, I'm 27. I felt old watching that. Like, that's how long ago this stuff is, how far in the past it is. But yeah, I mean, it's great to see PK around. I wish we could have gotten one more look at him on the ice in a Canadiens uniform. Same with Carey Price. I'll always long for, you know, guys being able to go out on their own terms. But yeah, it was closure, but I don't think I don't think it was exactly the way I would have wanted that to end. Obviously, it ends with a cup, and we have a different conversation.
100%. And he almost got that cup in Nashville, his first season there. Eric, let's pivot to you just from the Nashville perspective. It seemed like he was in Nashville for a longer amount of time, but it was only 3 years, and 2 of those seasons he missed around 20 games. So really, like 2 seasons and a half about in Nashville. What do you remember about PK as a Nashville Predator? What's his legacy there?
Yeah, I mean, as you guys know, I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, but I mean, the dude casts a huge shadow, and it did feel like he was here much longer than he was, obviously, acclimated himself into the community, was doing stuff with Vanderbilt Children's Hospital here as well. He's a huge personality. He's going to kill whatever he does on television, whatever he does with ESPN and whoever else he decides to work for. I think he was great for the game. I believe he will continue to be good for the game because he's so well spoken. He's not afraid to say the truth, which is the thing that all hockey players are afraid of or trained to be afraid of. So it was a nice a breath of fresh air. When this trade happened, I'm a huge Shea Weber fan. He was one of, if not my favorite Nashville Predator at the time. But I looked at it as the Nashville Predators won this trade. You're getting a more mobile, a more offensive, and a higher energy player in his prime. And Shea Weber was definitely an older player, still the captain, right? Still a good player, still had the crazy shot, was still, offensively, I think was underrated just because he was like this big kind of lumbering guy, but still like played on the top power play unit, the rocket shot that everyone knew about and feared. But I thought that they won that trade. I think it's almost a wash, right? It's almost pretty even. Subban was really good the first kind of year and a half. Then he got hurt and then started having troubles with his back and was kind of never really the same. Weber was pretty good to very good for the Habs. Then got hurt and fell off. Like he was playing hurt in that playoff run. And the stuff you hear about and stuff you hear from the players and from the medical staff there, like he shouldn't even have been able to move around, let alone play full contact hockey. So dude's a beast and it continues to still be one of my favorite players. But yeah, Subban here, it did seem like he played here for like 8 years and it wasn't that long. I never got to meet him, which is really rare. I've crossed paths with a lot of the players. It's not a big town, small town, and you know a lot of the same people and charity events and all this other stuff. But it was a guy that I never got to meet, and that makes me pretty sad. Actually, I've never heard a bad word spoken about him. The speech was amazing. When him and Carey Price did the 3 clap thing, the traditional thing, and the crowd went nuts. It's like, Preds are in trouble, man. I knew, I had a feeling about it. And like you said, tanking aside, look at the players they don't care about tanking. They're playing to win every night. They're not, Montreal's not put in a position to win. I think Slafkovsky, if they were in a position to win, he would be down and not playing with them. I still think that's something that they should seriously consider. But fun game. Once the triple handshake or triple clap or whatever you want to call it, once that happened, I knew we were in trouble. I knew it.
The triple low 5, yeah, the one
Triple
that
low 5.
Michel Therrien banned as soon as he was hired as head coach because apparently it was disrespecting the team and disrespecting the fans. So seems like the fans still enjoyed it quite a bit. But it was a great start to the game. I laughed really hard when Hal Gill, obviously a former defense pair for PK in Montreal and teammate in Nashville, I think. Hal was probably retired by the time PK was there, but
I think he may have played with him this first year.
His first year? Yeah. So, and also Hal's part of the broadcast crew there in Nashville now, so he's entrenched there, and Hal was always the best at chirping PK. I don't think anybody else, any of his teammates could ever chirp him so as effectively. Maybe Thomas Plekanec at times. But he took a screenshot of PK coming out and he was like, all right, game starts in 45 minutes. PK never shuts up, right? But he kept it short and sweet, I thought. Brought out the young lady from the Children's Hospital, elevated her. I think it's one of those things where that I love about PK Subban. This is his moment, and he takes that to give it to a kid who needs a bright spot. And it's just the kind of stuff that I think I'll never forget about the guy that he is. And, you know, you were talking about Shea Weber, and I think for whatever reason with PK Subban, anytime there's discourse around PK Subban or the PK Subban trade, there's like this reflex from a lot of people like, oh, well, so you hate Shea Weber. We can talk about PK Subban and greatness in his career without denigrating Shea Weber whatsoever. Like, I think Eric did a great job, and the whole situation with Weber and the Canadiens, like, yeah, the Canadiens were pretty terrible for most of the time that Weber was here, except for that one cup run. And that's not his fault. The team was just bad. Like he's not the GM, right? He's not the coach. So I think that there's a lot of consternation between like the two sides when there doesn't need to be two sides. And one thing that I'll always respect about Shea Weber, not to make it all about Shea Weber, is he ended his career for that playoff run. And there's a lot of guys on that team that did. That team was not super talented. They weren't particularly well coached, but guys like Shea Weber, Carey Price, Paul Byron, Brendan Gallagher, Eric Stahl either ended their careers or were never the same after that. And I think that speaks volumes about the character those guys had and how much they cared about each other to go on that cup run. So, yeah, we're talking about PK Subban. We are not disrespecting Shea Weber at all. So don't tell us that we are when you're watching this back. But the one thing that stood out to me the most in regards to PK talking about the team when he was doing his little speech was when he pointed at the crowd and he was like, if you give it all every night, they will always love you. And I watched the bench and I was like, oh, this first period's going to be good. You could tell like it resonated with the team. And I was like, okay, is PK joining the coaching staff next year? Like, is he going to be the pregame speech guy? Because that was pretty damn good, right? Like, and you heard, I remember Pekka Rinne talked about, he wrote an article in the Players Tribune after the cup run talking about how PK was one of the guys who like continually got them up for games. And when they eventually lost in the Stanley Cup final, he kind of helped them get over it by saying like, listen, we're going to be right back here. And obviously that wasn't true, but having a guy like that, and I think it goes to show what kind of guy he was in the locker room, aside from all of the, you know, manufactured controversies that happened in and around Montreal, or I heard one in Nashville as well, where he was cheating at cards on the plane, which I completely believe because he cheats at everything. But, you know, that's PK in a nutshell, right? He's hyper competitive, but I think he that passion also bleeds through to the rest of his team.
Yeah. And I mean, like, you know, we talk about, you know, the elephant in the room here is that, you know, Brendan Gallagher isn't much of a fan of PK. And, you know, I was thinking about it today, like, well, when PK gave, you know, he said at the beginning, like, if you give it all for this team, this city's going to love you. Him and Brendan Gallagher have a lot in common in that respect, because Brendan Gallagher is one of those leave it all out there kind of guys. They have a different way of approaching that and discussing it, but they're not all that dissimilar when it comes to the way that they value that crest, that the logo on their jersey. You know, I think for a while, like, we forgot that playing for this team is supposed to mean something. And I think that's, you know, the podcast interview that PK did recently with I think it's Ryan Clark of ESPN, where he talked about how like he was a Canadiens fan through and through growing up. This is the only place he wanted to play. At some point, like, that should matter when it comes to retaining players. And it's why I kind of scoff at, you know, Jeff Molson bringing him back in here. Well, you kind of signed off on his trade, right? Like, you were the president of hockey operations for the Montreal Canadiens, and you still are, you know, so it's all of it still leaves a pretty bad taste in my mouth, unfortunately. I'm sure that'll go away eventually, but, you know, for now, it's still that seeing both Carey and PK out there, as we kind of talked about with Weber as well, and Byron, and Gallagher won't give up that ghost just yet. He still really wants to play, even though it's looking increasingly unlikely that he'll ever return to the level that he was at. Those are all players that gave everything for this jersey. It's why we love them, right? It's why we watch these games. It's the one part of the last two seasons that's kind of been really difficult to stomach, is how there are just on a lot of nights, you can just see the guys who are going out there, tipping the puck in and getting off the ice. And PK was never one of those guys. Through all of the warts that people created for him, he was never one of those players.
Yeah, he couldn't do it, right? And sometimes
No.
to his detriment, right? Where that's why sometimes guys like Michel Therrien hated him.
Right.
He refused to make the simple play because he knew there was something better out there. You listen to Marty St. Louis talk and like finding the best play and reacting instead of being a drone to systems. Man, he would have been a great coach for PK Subban.
They would have gotten along real well.
Yeah.
Again, another shame with that.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the game. We won't stick too much on PK, but I will say I'm wearing my Nashville Predators PK Subban shirt, so I'm representing everybody tonight. But great game. Best first period of the Canadian season so far, in my opinion. 19 shots. They've had full games where they've had fewer shots than that. A large chunk of them over the last couple of years, actually. But one thing that stood out to me, and I know, Eric, you're a big fan of physical hockey. How much would you love to have Arbor Xhekaj on the Nashville Predators? Because he was laying the body tonight.
Yeah, I mean, and has done that since he came in. It's such a cool story of, working at Costco, and it's awesome. I mean, and to see a player like that get a real shot to play. I can tell you, I got a podcast with Chris Meany, and at the start of the year, I was like, I don't know, like 3 of the 6 starting defensemen for the Montreal Canadiens. I don't even know who they are, and I'm a hockey lunatic. I'll watch probably right now. I'll probably watch more than 300 live games this year. I consume it like nobody that I know, and I didn't know who they were, and that's problematic if you're a Montreal Canadiens fan. Because I'm not saying I know every player in the system, but I know I could probably sit here and name every player on every team if we had long enough. We don't, but they proved to be pretty good. Gully and Harris and Xhekaj hit one of the coolest nicknames too in the NHL, Wi-Fi. I showed my wife his name the other day. She goes, "It really does look like a Wi-Fi password." So it's dude, he's a tough customer. Him and Jeannot, really nobody hit anybody in that fight, but it was spirited. You kind of had a feeling that they were both going to go at it, and yeah, like you said, the first period for Canadians was really good. Sisson's missing an open net. That's problematic.
Twice.
Unbelievable. Twice. An unbelievable pass from UC Parson. In my notes, I've got his name underlined 4 times. That means I'm very serious.
He was incredible tonight.
Yeah, he was good.
He's been incredible since they brought him up, and he doesn't have a ton of goals. But I think tonight makes 11 assists for him in 10 games. So, and he's put into places where he should be. He's an offensive skilled player, and he's playing in those spots. It's really cool to see, man.
Yeah, 100%. And I gotta shout out that Xhekaj, having a great nickname is rare in the NHL today, but he has several. He's also got the Sheriff, which he brought from Junior, and I also really like one that got thrown around, the Jackhammer, which
you're forgetting
those are 3 unreal ones.
The Kirkland Killer.
The Kirkland Killer. Like he deserves them all. Like he's already got folk hero status in Montreal, and he's one of the guys who's actually been pretty consistent while the Canadians have been pretty terrible over these last month or so. But obviously he was throwing out the body tonight. The fight with Jeannot, I feel like they each got one shot in, but Xhekaj's he hit chin, but it was like with these 2 knuckles. So. And then they fell and, gave each other the good fight, head bop, and it was good. 2 tough guys going at it that can play. And that's the kind of tough guys that I love, right? They're going to fight once in a while, and I'm not a huge fighting and hockey guy, but when it's about an emotional moment or things are going on and 2 guys get into it and it's real, I'm all for that. If they don't really seriously injure each other, and the respect after the fight. I love that. The one thing that I hate about fighting the most in the NHL is when a guy falls down and the other guy starts pummeling him while he's down, and neither guy had any interest in doing that, and I love that. I love the good sportsmanship.
Yeah, no, fighting is what it is. We're not removing it. I don't want to glorify it. I will say that Jack was doing a pretty good job staying out of the penalty box for like a half dozen games, and he was still in the league, in the league for penalty minutes. And now he just decided I'm just going to run away with it now. I think the only guy competing with him was former Canadian Nick Delorier. So pretty tough customer himself.
Yeah.
100%, 100%. All right. What else I have here? I had for the first time this year, or for the first time in a long time, the Canadiens get scored on first, which I expected with how great they started after getting scored on first, that there was a possibility that they would fall apart tonight. They did. And so I got to give the whole team credit for that, coaching staff credit for that. It seemed to me like they really wanted to win this game. And I'm not saying that the problem has been that they don't want to win, because like Eric said earlier, I think every team goes into every game wanting to win. But in an 82 game season, I think you can't get that 100% effort for every single game. And like there's some teams where you have, one or two or even three great lines where they kind of alternate and each one will have a great night like every game that week, and that gets them through. The Canadiens don't have that. So when that top line doesn't score, things fall apart. But tonight, again, the Jake Evans line was stellar, and the top line got it done on the power play. They from the drop of the puck to the end of the game seemed extremely committed to getting this win. And it's funny, the speculation before the game was like, oh, well, why would these guys care about Subban being honored, right? And Gallagher not liking him or whatever, and maybe it was just gonna like throw them off. I think they saw in how the fans reacted to Subban how it can be in Montreal when you win, and that was just that extra motivating factor to win this specific one.
Yeah,
like you said with the line, the line from Subban of saying, if you give everything, these people will love you, and that's it. I mean, if that doesn't motivate you as an athlete, I don't know what does.
Exactly, right? And there's not many arenas like the Bell Center that get going on, like we talked about Slavkovsky earlier and how he's been struggling offensively. He got a standing ovation tonight for 2 big block shots, right? And then ran out to try to clear the zone. Yeah, and a hit, yeah. So like it's little stuff like that might not happen in every rink, right? The attention to detail the Canadiens fans have and the appreciation of the little things. It was really nice to see the team kind of comprehend that and give that kind of effort tonight, because I do think they've been better the last 3 or 4 games, but it's been a stretch where there hasn't been much attention to detail. There has been like slumping shoulders. There has been just like, if you're going to go for a puck in a puck battle and it's a race, they're like, oh, well, I'm just going to slack off a little bit and let the other guy get there and just kind of wrap my stick around. That extra effort hasn't really been there, and it was tonight.
Yeah, and you can't manufacture those emotions, right? You can't bottle up what it felt to hear that ovation tonight, because if you could, Montreal would never have to do it again after what we saw with the Guy Lafleur tribute last season, right?
Yeah,
like that was, for as much as a meaningless game I've ever seen, the loudest that building has ever been. Like, if you could bottle it up and manufacture it in another location, the Canadiens would never have to worry about that. But like, and we've seen it at points this season where the fans at the Bell Center are trying to will the Canadiens into games. I think it was the Tampa game, they were down by 4 in the third period, and they started doing the wave. Like, they're trying to enjoy themselves and they're trying to breathe life into that building. And so many times it's just really difficult. I think that once again speaks to just like the characters that PK and Carey Price are. Because I mean, the pop when Price walked out was unlike anything I've ever heard.
Yeah, the pop for the 005 was huge, right? Yeah. And Eric mentioned he knew the Preds were in trouble at that point. I mean, also second half of a back-to-back, right? I think we got to recognize that. But the Canadiens are a team that could benefit from the second half of a back-to-back here and there. They could really use it. What else did I have here? Oh, Jesse Ylonen. First game of the year for him. Huge performance from him, I thought. I thought he, like last year, when he was up for a short stretch, I thought he would look like an NHLer last year, better than a lot of the veterans who were stuck here on long-term contracts. Again, tonight, it's going to be hard to send him down, I think.
Yeah, no, agreed. And it's funny how Drouin and Yolonen were both the extra skaters, and there's 4 points between them at the end of the night. Like just a really strong performance from those guys, and it makes it a lot harder for a guy like Mike Hoffman to get back into this lineup. As much as like I think he's been playing pretty well. Like it's tough. Like Marty clearly wants to get guys like Armia going. He clearly wants to get guys further up in the lineup like Dodonov. He's putting Dodonov in some more in some better situations, playing him with their hottest forward, Jake Evans. Both him and Armia were both with Evans, and they deployed as the second line tonight. But yeah, I don't know how Yolonen goes back down if he can continue to play like this.
It's going to be a tough decision. I did want to talk about Nashville a little bit too, because I got to ask you, Eric, does Roman Josi have something on his stick that sticks the puck there? Some sort of weird technology or like a glue? Because I've watched Roman Josi a lot, and he's always been great. But tonight, they could not get the puck off that man's stick. I saw a couple full-on good-looking stick checks, and he was just like, no, I'm just going to keep going. He was amazing tonight.
I mean, there's not a night where you don't say that at least once watching him play. He's just such a gift. Nashville has been really a defenseman factory from its onset, and also now with Askarov playing his first NHL game, a goalie factory as well. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of fans here that look at this during that Anaheim run where we beat them and made it into the second round, and then obviously the Stanley Cup run where they played Pittsburgh. This is not a hockey city. It's never going to be a hockey city. We're in the South. It is football is king, and everything else takes a backseat. But I can tell you that the ticket prices will tell you that it is definitely a number two in this city, and the arena is full all the time. It sells out every night when they're in the playoffs. Doesn't matter. Everyone knew we were going to get demolished by Colorado. It didn't matter. The building was full. The building was loud. But Josi is just, dude, he's amazing. It's Chris Mason, the color guy from here. He had a really good line last year. He said he's like the night crawler, where he's in the corner battling for a puck, and then he skates behind the net, and then there's a 2-on-1 going the other way, and he's the only one back.
Yeah.
And you're like, how? Like, he's just, I mean, he is what defensemen are now and what people are looking for. He's physical when he needs to be. He has an unbelievable stick and can skate. Like, he's not the fastest, but just his edge work and his ability, like, he doesn't have the skating ability of Cal McCarr, but he's right in that stratosphere. And, it's just, I feel so lucky to be able to watch this guy. And I'll tell you, this is obviously one of the most handsome human beings on the planet. And on top of that, literally one of the nicest guys you will ever meet. And you're just like, screw you, man. Like, you can't be good at everything. You can't, like, crazy good looking, one of the best athletes in the world. His wife is gorgeous, and he's one of the best human beings on earth. Like, me and him don't know each other well, but every time he sees me and we have a conversation, it's like we've been best friends for 25 years. It's unbelievable. I just feel so lucky to be able to watch him. I've watched him his whole career, and I hope he never leaves Nashville.
Dude's got juiced stats, just like his everything stats all the way to the max, right? If he was a video game character, like when he was born, somebody was using the Game Shark. It's ridiculous.
Oh yeah, Game Shark, the gold one.
It's a throwback.
Did Josi leave the ice in the last 5 minutes of this game? It seemed like he was out there forever.
Always,
yeah. Like, on the few icings that Montreal sent back the other way, you could just look at him and be like, he's got nothing left in the tank, and he's still out there. Yeah, it was wild.
Yeah, he was fantastic. And, you mentioned that he may not be like the fastest skater in the league, but I wonder, like, I'm a terrible skater, and it's one of the things in hockey where I'm not a good analyst of like what makes a great skater. Like, I can see some things like with like Sidney Crosby. I know edge work is a big thing for him, right? 'Cause it's his agility to be able to go back and forth that makes his skating so special. But with Josi, I wonder if like the efficiency of his stride is so great that it allows him to just have energy at all times. And it's like you may not be the fastest skater, but you might be the best skater. if you know what I mean. There's like a slight difference, just technically, right?
His skating style, like to me, like I mean, I can skate. I played hockey my whole life. I'm not good at it, but I know a ton about it. And watching him, there's times where it can. He's one of those players where it can look like he's not even working hard, right? It's like this. He's not a tall guy, but he has this long, kind of really smooth stride, and it can be times where you're like, oh my God, he's never going to catch him. Why is he not skating harder? And he just is like passing everybody.
Yeah.
Someone like, McKinnon, it's choppy and it's powerful and it's erratic at times, but he's just like a freight train. And then McDavid is just like on another.
Yeah.
There's no one that can skate like him. Nobody in the NHL, nobody in the world. People that have never skated and never watched hockey, you could watch Connor McDavid and say, there's something different about how he moves. It's just the way it is. But Yossi's one of those guys that's just effortless. It seems, and he's crazy competitive, right? Like still very physical, but the whistle blows and he's like, okay, we're all best friends again, and just skates off. Like it's unbelievable how the switch can go on and off. Such a good player, man. Such an amazing player.
Yeah, and it seemed like that's kind of maybe an attitude that's bled through to the whole Predators roster in a way. Because I feel like tonight was a very physical game, but it never crossed the line into dirty. Both teams, I think, had like a healthy respect for each other out there tonight. It was just like a highly entertaining game from end to end. Like I saw the intermission after the second was saying like, oh, like a little bit of a low event period. Shots were only like 5 to 6 or something. And I was like, low event? Like maybe by shots, but like, did you watch that period? It was absolutely wild.
Yeah, I think Askarov is probably a lot to thank for that. I mean,
that's true.
He was in the first period. I mean, he got a real baptism by fire. I think like he was fighting for his life out there, and they don't ask how, they ask how many. He looked ridiculous in that first period. There were a couple of saves where Askarov was like, I mean, it hurt me watching him do the things he was doing. The split save that he pulled on Harris on the 2-on-1. I love when goalies play the puck, so I love that he was really active, and I think that's what bled into a lot of like the high eventness of that second period was he just came out to play the puck like every 30 seconds is what it felt like.
Yeah, it absolutely did. And Askarov, we talked about him a little bit before we started the show. I thought based on the pressure that he faced in the first period, his first game in the NHL, how confident he was with the puck, I loved his game. I think maybe like the first, like the Jake Evans goal, probably he wants back, but most goalies are letting in the Kirby Dach goal and both Cole Caulfield goals. So no shame for him tonight. I thought that he played a really great first game of his career. And I think he's probably going to be on a few Steve Dangle dang it videos with the amount he plays the puck, because that's going to bite him eventually. I thought it was the craziest one was when he just held the puck and basically dared, I forget which forechecker it was for the Canadiens, to come in and try to take the puck away. He never moved it. And the Canadiens player peeled off at the last second thinking he was going to pass, and he just didn't. It was wild.
Yeah, I mean, that takes supreme confidence, right? Like you see a guy that age, like I don't know if he's even 21. I don't know how old he is, but I know that he's very young. The confidence, I mean, he's standing a foot and a half from his net, right? Like, I mean, there's nobody there. There's nobody back. It's him and the Canadiens player. I'm not sure who it was. It might have been Armia. I'm not 100% sure.
I think it was.
He just freezes, and Armia peels off to the corner, and he's still got the puck on a stick. And then on the Preds broadcast, Chris Mason obviously played goal for the Preds and St. Louis Blues. He's saying like you got to be careful with that. It's a thin line of like confidence and overconfidence, and he's going to get caught sooner or later, just like you were saying. And then literally there was a race for a puck, and he skated out past the hash marks to play it, and they all just kind of just laughed and be like, "Oh, here we go." Rebound control was something to be desired tonight, but there was a video from the Milwaukee Admirals, and they're doing these goalie drills where they're going post to post, and it's like 2 or 3 of the Admirals goalies, and he's like literally lapping the other 2 goalies. He's going post to post at double the speed of the other 2. These are NHL, have AHL contracts and AHL contracts just like him, 2-way contracts, and they looked like they were in slow motion compared to him. I mean, what they put up the stat, I think he was the highest drafted goalie since Carey Price. And there are a lot of people in World Junior last year and when the Preds drafted him were comparing him and his kind of skill set and his ability at this age to carry Price. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, I especially like the save that stuck out the most to me. Obviously, he had the big one on Harris on the 2-on-1, but the save that he made on Evgeny Dodonov in I believe the second period, which was like a series of great plays by Dodonov where he batted it through Nashville defender's legs and then created a breakaway for himself, which frankly has been pretty rare for Dodonov this season.
Yeah.
And then the patience Dodonov showed, I was like, there's no way this isn't a goal. And then at the last second, I don't even know how Askarov was able to do it. He stuck out that leg and just took it all away. I was blown away by his ability to stick with that play. As like you said, he's not going to be 21 until June.
Yeah.
And buy a beer at Applebee's playing in the NHL. Think about it. It's wild. In the United States. I know you guys aren't used to that, but
This is true.
still 21 here for some
Well, they
reason.
can get him a beer tonight after the game, which he deserves.
Yeah, that's right.
So
Enjoy Montreal, buddy.
I hope his Nashville Predators teammates are treating him well tonight, and he doesn't end up with the bad credit card roulette that they do to all the rookies in the NHL, which they got to stop doing that. That's just mean. Have some guy who's making like league minimum or less on a call up have to pay for like a $50,000 dinner. NHLers, they're mean. All right. Last thing about hockey tonight: Cole Caulfield, another 2 goals. He's been the only consistent offensive force, I guess you could say, all season, but also through this period where the Canadiens have not been great. He's now on pace for, I believe, 49 goals in 82 games. Getting close to that 50 goal pace again. What is there left to say about Cole Caulfield other than this guy deserves to be an all-star?
I think the everyone's afraid of drafting and developing small forwards because they are afraid they can't play physical games. They take too many hits. Cole Caulfield got bumped again tonight, but the last time he did was against Calgary. The only time he seems to take big hits is when the guy hitting him has no idea what's going on. Like Craig Smith ran into him accidentally and he kneed him in the head accidentally. He just walked into him. I think it was it Trevor Lewis in the Calgary game who just completely lost where he was on the ice and ran into Cole Caulfield on accident. So like if you were going to find something of Cole Caulfield's game to knock him for, it would be his size. And it has had absolutely no impact on the way that he plays. He can shoot and score from the perimeter. He can also get into really high danger chances because he has a good habit of just disappearing. He finds really sneaky ways to get in behind defensemen. Him and Suzuki are starting to find that chemistry again. Where I think they're just more often than not, actually being able to complete passes. He's been one of like the consistent bright spots to watch this season. I can't wait until he's scoring goals that I don't want to say matter because they all matter to him because he's going to try to put up 40 goals for the first time for the Canadiens in 30 years. But, it's going to be cool again watching him score in the playoffs. Here it's hard to remember that he already did that.
Yeah.
Because that just seems like a completely different era of this team. He scored goals in the Stanley Cup semifinal, So he's a load of fun. It's one of the bright spots of a pretty dim season.
And everybody who's like, I got a couple of tweets tonight saying like, are people going to realize that Cole Caulfield's going to single-handedly ruin their chance to get Bedard? Stop it. Enjoy special players doing special things.
And they're going to win it with Florida's pick anyway, so don't worry about it.
Exactly. All right. I guess the only other thing that I wanted to point out about tonight is aside from the effort being there, what struck me about the Canadiens this game was they were actually trying creative plays. Like there were some passing plays in this game that we haven't seen the Canadiens even attempt for 20 games. Which I guess Eric should tell you how rough of a season it's been, but at the same time, I got to tell you, a lot better than last season.
Yeah.
I mean, I follow, like, I'm not making that up. I will watch over 300 games this year. I do it every year and have for the last decade. Then I'll get up and I'll watch highlights on NHL Network or the In the Crease with my buddy Ardo Cal on ESPN. I have a subscription to the Hockey News like a lunatic. I gifted one to Chris Meany. I don't know if he wants one, but I gifted one to him for Christmas. And I'm in like 45 fantasy leagues. Like I'm a psycho. And I watch the Canadiens, and the stuff like Cole Caulfield is a gift for hockey. And I think it's going the right way where, like, Jeff Merrick says this a lot of times. He said, 5-10 years ago, it was a big player had to prove that he couldn't play in the NHL, and a small player had to prove that he could. And now it's physicality is definitely not going away. But if you got any VHS tapes, Rock'em Sock'em, or an old tape, it's not the same game as it was 15 years ago, and it's not even close. Like, I think a lot of us, me included, forget how slow and how insanely mean and physical and violent hockey was. And it's just not like that anymore. And being tall doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. Especially now, someone like Jack Hughes, he's tiny. He's a great player. One of the, I would say probably top 15 in the NHL right now. Trevor Zegras is one of the most exciting players. He's tiny. Cole Caulfield might be one of the most electric players in the league, and he's not a dwarf, but he's not too far off.
He's a hobbit.
He's a very, very small man. A very small man.
They used to call him Bilbo. I don't know if that nickname stuck or if you didn't really like it, but I personally love it. So
I'm short. Nobody likes being called short. So I feel for him.
I'm short too. I love it when the short kings do something cool in the NHL. I've always been a fan. One of my favorite players growing up was Theo Fleury, which
me too, man.
Unfortunately, can't really be a fan of him anymore. He's gone off the deep end.
Has aged poorly.
He's not my favorite human being, but when he played hockey and didn't talk, I really enjoyed him.
Exactly. He was amazing on the ice, right? Like an absolute firebrand, dirty as all hell. Didn't back down from anybody.
He was
loved
awesome,
him as a player, but obviously has had a very, very tough life.
Marty St. Louis too. I mean, he didn't take crap from anybody. One of my favorite players of all time, Doug Gilmour. I had no idea how little he was. Even when you're little, like nobody really talked about it. And then like I look at, I have hockey cards. I look at the back, or, you see when I watch old footage on tape, you're like, he was tiny. His nickname was Killer. And like, often most nights at that point, he was probably one of the smallest, if not the smallest guy on the ice most nights. And he was a maniac player. He was not afraid of anybody or anything.
Yeah, he was an incredible player. He was incredible. Although I still say he bladed in the playoffs, and Gretzky didn't get him with the high stick.
Oh, yes, he did. Yes, he did. If I ever meet Wayne Gretzky, I'm good buddies with Paul Bissonnette, and I will drink beers with Wayne Gretzky, and I'm bringing it up. I don't care.
We might have to get the wine going for Gretzky to talk about it. We'll see. It didn't matter. It didn't matter. He didn't win the cup anyway.
I'll supply it. You just got to come clean. That's a penalty. And the LA Kings should have never played in the playoff or in the Stanley Cup final. It should have been the Maple Leafs and the Canadiens, and the Maple Leafs should have won.
4-game sweep. That's what it would have been.
Spoken like a true Toronto Maple Leafs fan. So bitter. Full of hate.
Always bitter about 93. No Canadiens fan is, though. I did want to talk to you about wrestling a little bit, Eric, because obviously big moment for you recently with Impact Wrestling where you were killed off. But before we get into your personal story, because I've been, looking into more wrestling stuff and like researching your career a little bit in prep for having you on, and I guess just from search history and watching different things, my TikTok page is just full of wrestling content all of a sudden out of nowhere, and I keep on getting
will get you, buddy. You got to be careful.
I know, right? And I keep on getting like variations of the same video, and it continually cracks me up. Is there anything in the history of wrestling that's ever happened that's funnier than Vince McMahon coming into the Royal Rumble and blowing out both of his quads? It is honestly one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life.
There's nothing more hilarious. I mean, not my favorite person in the world, and I
not many
bask in the
people's.
glory of that move. Yeah, it was an all-timer for sure.
Yeah, that's a Connecticut native. The McMahon family is not very well received. So, I know that they have the big WWE building in Stamford, but also Linda McMahon was our governor for a short period of time, and it did not go well.
There's a lot of that going around right now.
Yeah. No kidding. All right.
Not a lot
So
of goodwill for the McMahons.
no. It's been a while since there has been, I would say. But so obviously you had an epic storyline that ran through on Impact Wrestling, where you're this basically the leader of this group, and you've been kind of overthrown, and I don't know if this has ever happened before in wrestling. You were stabbed to death. Supposedly. Maybe he's alive. Who knows?
I mean, you never really see it. You know, it's something that wasn't shown. But yeah, I mean, for me, like the best part of wrestling is storytelling.
Yes.
And that's what keeps people interested. You know, the physicality of it is amazing. You know, the athleticism, it is amazing. That's something that always drew me to it as well. But for me, the biggest part was the storytelling and being able to tell this kind of full circle story. A lot of the story is true with me and Diener, a guy that I've known for 20 plus years. I helped train him in Ontario. He's one of the most underrated and talented performers in wrestling right now, and it's cool to see him kind of get a bit of the spotlight. Very similar paths for me and him. He's the reason that I was the reason he got brought into the group. I wanted it because of the story of it, and me and his history, our real life history. And you know, it was really cool. I mean, it's the last 2 years at Impact Wrestling were probably the favorite of my entire career, and it's a long one, man. There's a lot of stuff. I mean, if you were on the Wikipedia, you saw it all, and it's a long list of crazy things and a bunch of different things, funny stuff and sad stuff. And but the thing I'm most proud of is the last 2 years, and ending it like that is like, you know, I feel like if you're 14 years old and you're watching Impact every week and you see that, like, you're never going to forget that. That you're never going to forget that. Good, bad, or indifferent, like, you're going to remember it. It's something that's very memorable. A really cool way to go out. In a weird way, it wasn't an overthrow. It was like this weird story where I was grooming him, where I knew eventually I would have to leave, and the person to take over was going to be him, and he didn't realize that until that moment. Then there's like the struggle for the knife, and I got killed, and yeah, something I'm very, very proud of, man. Something I'm very proud of, and won't ever forget the last 2 years of my career there. Yeah,
it was like watching it. It was, you think it's going to be like this big animosity moment, and at the end, it was almost like a peaceful passing of the torch.
Yep.
But in character, you have to do the insanity thing. So it was pretty metal. I got to say that, Eric. It was pretty cool.
Very proud of it, man. It was very well received by everybody in the wrestling world, which is really cool. Stuff like that, you know, on the artistic side, or, you know, we told a story without a match. There's no winner or loser. You know, it was just this thing that we shot in this little place here in Nashville. And, you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Eric Tompkins and David Sahadi, the guys that really are the brains behind that stuff and putting it together. Those are the most talented guys, the production crew, you know, editing it and putting it together and setting us up. And, you know, we have to execute in the end, but we can't execute if they don't put us in that position. There's so many talented people behind the scenes, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Eric Tompkins. He's a genius when it comes to that stuff.
Awesome. I'm going to steal a question from our Game Over Toronto host, Fouad, who had Edge on their show a couple weeks ago, and I thought it was just a great question. Obviously, you've got a lot of runway left. You're not at the end of your career, Eric, but if you're looking forward, if you could plan out your dream last match, how do you think it should go? What kind of match, and who would you want to go against?
Yeah, I mean, for me, look, I've been a wrestling fan since I was 3. It's all I've ever wanted to do. It sounds cliche and corny and whatever, but as sure as I'm sitting here talking to you, I am living my dream and have been since 2004. That's when I signed my first contract, and I could tell people that my job is pro wrestling. It's not my job right now. My job is talking hockey, which is kind of wild. But when I figure out whatever is next, you guys will be the first to know. But yeah, for me, it would be a passing of the torch. Like, if I'm leaving, you know, kind of an unwritten rule, and wrestling is a thing, is like, you pass your experience and you pass your clout and you pass your feather to someone younger that is going to say, like, oh, I was the one that took Eric Young out of wrestling, and I handed that to Cody, to Diener at Impact on my way out there. And I hope to do that somewhere else. Just again, like you said, I wouldn't say I got a lot of runway. I got a good chunk of runway left, for sure. But I definitely want to do things the right way. I'm a historian. I'm a traditionalist when it comes to wrestling, and that's the way it should be done. And that's the way I hope for it to happen for me.
With that in mind, I mean, obviously, I guess you don't want to pull like a full Ric Flair and wrestle into your 70s, but
no, I definitely do not want to do that. I have no interest in doing that.
I feel like that would be so hard on the body. Like, I just can't imagine it, because I think even people who grow up with wrestling, and I think the easiest path is watching WWE, obviously, but if you see like Raw and SmackDown and then like a main event on the weekend, I don't think people realize that you guys wrestle. Like, the schedule is insane. Like, when you're on that tour, it's like every night.
Yeah, it's always interesting. So I'm friends with some of the Titans players. I'm really good buddies with Mike Fisher. We have dinner and lunch several times a year. And one of the first times we're having lunch, and he was like, "So, like, when's your off season?" And I was like,
What's an off season?
He's like, "What?" And he's like, you don't take time off? I was like, I haven't had time off in 18 years, and the first time I had more than 6 months where I didn't wrestle is when I tore my ACL. That was my off season. I tore my ACL, and I appeared on every show, but I didn't wrestle for 6 months. That's the longest I've gone since 1997. And knock on wood, that never happens again. But yeah, it never ends. And I mean, the honest truth is, the wrestling, in the ring, that stuff, it can be very physical for sure, but that's the reward, right? That's the best part, and often is the easiest part. It's the 6-hour flight and coach, and then the 4-hour drive in the backseat of a car, and sleeping in a strange bed in a strange place, and waking up and not knowing where you're at, and that never ends. That it's all year round. Guys in the WWE, like it's weekly, and it never ends. It never ends. Your hardest day of work is Monday night, and that's when you're asked to go as hard as you can. It's we talked about back-to-backs in hockey. Well, Monday night is the fourth game, game in a row, and you're expected to be at your best. And casual people and even diehard fans don't fully understand it. And it's a very, very difficult and hard way to make a living, but I wouldn't change any of it, man. Like, any of it. I mean, concussions and injuries, and I'll be crippled and need new hips and knees and stuff when I get older. But I wouldn't change any of it.
Yeah, I feel like that's like the sentiment you get from every wrestler who's made it, right? Is it's hard, but the passion has to be so strong for you to get to that point that you love it so much that you never do anything else.
They get sorted out pretty early. Yeah, they get sorted out pretty early. You gotta, I mean, especially like someone like me. Like, I grew up in a town, Florence, Ontario, population of 65 people, right? Like, the closest McDonald's is 40 minutes away. Like, I'm not good at math, and I was promised there would be no math here today. But I think, if you were really good at math and you were to figure it out, me sitting here and saying that I've wrestled and had a career like I've had, and I now through that doors have opened, and I've been on ESPN, and I do this thing with FTN with Chris, and I'm sitting here talking to you like I'm somebody. That's all those doors have all been open because of wrestling. And from where I came to where I am now, it's probably less than a 2% chance. Like, I'm 5'11". I was chubby. My parents didn't have money. I don't know anybody or knew anybody in wrestling. I started at negative, right? Not zero, negative, because I was in Canada, and you can't make a living in Canada and wrestling in the United States. It just doesn't happen. So it is true. I mean, mathematically, I think there's probably less than a 2% chance that I'm sitting here right now talking to you, but here we are, man, living the dream.
It's the best. It's the best.
Yep.
What you mentioned earlier about passing on like your clout and your like the torch on your way out. Is there? 'Cause I've kind of heard from like people who are more involved in the industry, that the whole like the Montreal screw job, that there was a lot of, I don't want to say disrespect, it's not the right word, but like the way that Bret Hart wanted to leave in that situation, there wasn't a lot, like there was some angst about that he wanted to win on the way out. Is that something that is kind of like a faux pas in wrestling?
Yeah, it's just not the way it's done. And look at Bret Hart is and will always be one of the best professional wrestlers to ever live. I think probably, maybe in my opinion, the best physical storyteller ever in the history of wrestling. And I don't think anybody can touch him. I think there's people that are better than him at wrestling. I think there's better, better athletes and better, but I mean, just a person with limited athletic ability was able to capture. I believe there was a time in Canada he could have ran for prime minister and won. I mean, I'm not making that up. I honestly believe that. And he was popular there, but there was quarters of the United States where he was equally as popular. And in wrestling at that time, a Canadian being that popular on an American television show was just not something that happened. And he was very singular in that way. But Bret Hart believed that he was Bret Hart, the one that you saw on TV.
Right.
And my real name is Jeremy Fritz.
Yep.
I'm Eric Young only when I come through the curtain. The minute I walk back through the curtain, I'm Jeremy Fritz again. If you walked in my house right now, you would have no idea that I'm a pro wrestler. I don't have a single picture. I don't have nothing. I mean, I have hockey sticks and some jerseys laying around, but you would have no idea. And for him in that moment, there's a lot of stuff going on, and I don't pretend to know all of it. But the reality is he's leaving. He's not going to be there anymore. So the right thing to do as a professional is you say, okay, I'm on my way out. This is the next guy, like him or not. The professional thing to do is to put him over in a manner that makes him look strong. And that's not what he wanted to happen. And he threatened to take the belt with him and all this other stuff. Like, again, I don't know. I wasn't there. The only ones that can really answer those questions is Bret, Sean, and Vince. But there's been enough talked about it. There's a lot of politics and weirdness in wrestling. I don't involve myself with them. I can't change it. I'm not a political person. I don't have the energy for it. I don't have the appetite for it. Most of the time it disgusts me. Politics and wrestling, politics in general, are disgusting. So I don't concern myself with them. But yeah, I mean, the rules of wrestling and the rules of the profession, he should have just lost to Sean and went on about his business.
Do you think it was a work?
No, absolutely not.
No.
How it happened is how it happened. I've had conversations with Earl, and I feel like he was backed into, Vince was backed into a corner. Again, I'm not defending Vince McMahon. He's not my favorite person.
Yeah, don't worry. There's no defending Vince McMahon here.
No, I'm not trying to do that. But what I'm saying is he really was trying to protect the WWE and what he had created. And I understand that. And I think if you ask Bret, he probably would understand it to this point too. And I've been around Bret several times. He's always been kind to me. He's always been complimentary of me. And like I said, I think he's one of the best time ever. But in that moment, that's a moment for him to say, okay, it's time for, I don't like John. We don't get along, but we're going to have this match and it's going to be great. And I'm going to look good and he's going to make me look good. And I'm going to make him look good. And I'm going to this other place to make all this money. And here's my feather for you, Sean. And off he goes to make more feathers. And that's how it's supposed to be done.
It's one of those things that, like, if you were to approach it from the outside, you probably would have gotten to the right point for Bret Hart. But being in it at the time where there's that animosity, right?
He's trying to protect his image and his, like I said, he believes that he's Bret Hart. And if he loses, people in Canada aren't going to like him. I mean, the reality is 85% of the people know that you're not winning or losing anything. It's not a competition. So it's wild how wrapped up some guys can get in winning and losing. I've never concerned myself with it. I never will.
Yeah. Get wrapped up in your own storyline, right? And it becomes real to you.
I'm playing a character on a television show, man.
Absolutely. And a great one, let's be honest. There's a reason why wrestling is still part of, like, it's so ingrained in, like, sport culture and just, like, the culture of, I guess millennials it's just lasted, right? Like how
Dude,
how
it's a
long?
juggernaut.
Yeah, it
It's a
is.
billion-dollar industry, and we can say whatever we want about Vince McMahon. I mean, I live in this big, beautiful house in Nashville. I have this amazing life because he refused just to say that wrestling was regional. He said, "There's no reason that people can't watch this all over the world. They want to, and I know it." And he refused to say to the answer no. And he created cable television. You can say whatever you want. The WWE was the first to do it. You know, pay-per-view was made massive by the WWE. Streaming, he was ahead of his time with all of that, with networking and all. Like, it's a juggernaut. It took the world 40 years to realize it. It's this massive juggernaut in the media world. Fox pays them $2.8 billion for the rights to air their weekly show of television show. That tells you all you need to know.
Yep. 100% does. All right. Last question for you, Eric, just quickly. Royal Rumble, or that crazy thing the WCW did in the 90s where it was Royal Rumble but with three rings.
Yeah, it's Royal Rumble for me. It might be my favorite match.
It's always been my favorite.
It's on my bucket list. I worked there for 2 years and was backstage at 2 of them and never got a chance to be in them. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely bucket list. If I'm never in one, I mean, it'll be fine. Like I've already accomplished more in wrestling than I ever thought I would. My only goal getting into it was to sign a contract so I could tell people that I knew that I did it for a living. I did that in 2004, and everything since then has been gravy, man.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for joining me on this show tonight, Eric. And of course, Ian, it was a fantastic game tonight. I hope Canadiens fans enjoyed it. I hope Predators fans enjoyed it. And we'll be back on Saturday.
We didn't enjoy it as much.
No, probably not as much. But hey, you know, it was still
good
a good
road
game.
trip for them. We're sniffing the playoffs, so all is well.
Exactly. And you know what? They played well enough on the second half of a back-to-back, I think, that you can be a little bit happy about it, right? I think it
could have used that extra point in Toronto the other night. Could have really
yes,
used that.
It would have been less of a sting if they would have beat Toronto, right?
Yep.
Unfortunate, but what can you do? All right, everybody, thanks so much for watching, and make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you ring the bell so you can make sure that you get notifications whenever a video is posted. And follow Eric at the Eric Young on Twitter. Follow Ian at maybe it's Ian. It is Ian. There's no maybe about it. Don't be fooled by the name. And subscribe to the Build Podcast and check out Danglebet Shelly on the Fantasy Sports Network. We'll see you Saturday. Until then, this has been Game Over Montreal. I just keep on running. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. Doing a Michael Scott here.
Game over! Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook.